morning and welcome to the Hillbilly Chicken Ranch. I'm Susan, I'm your hostess. And today we are going to can crushed tomatoes that I prepared yesterday. In yesterday's video I showed you how to prepare the tomatoes for canning. Today we're going to sterilize our jars because we're water bath canning. I've already had this on for a little bit, trying to get the water up to temperature. I'm going to go ahead and put the cover on, and we're going to get started on the tomatoes. These will sterilize once they come to a boil for 10 minutes. We are going to use the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving, and I am using the water method, which is found, I had the page, I'm sorry y'all. It's found on page 357. So this is the water bath canning method. For crushed tomatoes, there is also on page 376, you can do it with the pressure canner. It's just your choice on this recipe. The recipe is basically the same for both. You're going to prepare your tomatoes, you're going to get them ready for the canner. You're going to add your lemon juice or your citric acid into your jars. You're going to add your salt into your jars. And then you're going to get your jars into your canner, the canner of your choice. And for the pressure canner, it says the pressure can quarts for 15 minutes at 10 pounds. It doesn't really tell you, let's see. You're going to leave a 1-inch headspace, and of course you're going to steam vent for 10 minutes before you do all this. You got to get it up to pressure, then you're going to time it for 15 minutes, and then you're going to turn it off, and you're going to allow it to cool naturally. Now the recipe that I'm following, I can boil pints for 35 minutes, and I can boil the quart jars or the 1-liter jars for 45 minutes, and then you wait 5 minutes after you finish that time. You turn your burner off and you wait 5 minutes, then you take them out of the canner. And of course it is, and this way I'm using a 1/2-inch headspace. But if you pressure can it, it is a 1-inch headspace. So that's really the only difference in the recipes. And I highly recommend this canning book for anybody that is planning on starting to can. It's got so many recipes in here. It gives you step-by-step instructions. It gives you a lot of good information at the beginning about different things that can go wrong. And it tells you a lot about the canners, how to troubleshoot, all kinds of things. So it's really a good handy book to have. This is on Amazon. I've linked it before. I'll link it again in my description box below. I do not get any compensation for sharing this. This is just because we bought the book and we like the book that we're sharing this. We're not compensated. So let's get started, y'all. This recipe does not specify how many tomatoes that you need. So it doesn't give you the amount of jars that you will use. I've got 7 quarts in my canner behind me, getting ready to sterilize. And it says to work in small batches. So I've already done the first 2 steps. I've got my jars being prepared, and my lids are going to be prepared. And I've already done the skin, taken the skins off and gotten all my tomatoes chopped and everything. A matter of fact, it specifies the separation of juices from solids. It says when tomatoes are crushed before being heated, exposure to air activates the natural enzyme. This enzyme breaks down pectin, which causes the liquids and solids to separate. This phenomenon is the cause of watery sauces, it is also the villain that causes solids to separate from liquids in jars of processed products of tomatoes. Heating tomatoes immediately after they are cut or crushed activates this enzyme. That's why many of our recipes direct you to cut small quantities of tomatoes and heat them in batches. Well, I didn't follow that because I had so many tomatoes that needed to be cut up and processed. And if my sauce turns out to be a little on the watery side, I've always got my tomato powder to help thicken that back up. With that said, I've got tomatoes in my pantry that did not separate. So, you know, it just depends on the cook, I guess. But we're going to follow the recipe as far as we can. This is my kitchen, my rules, and I always say that I am responsible for what I do in my kitchen, just like you're responsible for what you do in your kitchen. You cannot blame me for giving you wrong information if you don't do your own research. And I can't blame you if you give me a recipe and it's not correct. That's just not how it works, folks. So we are going to get our tomatoes started. I've pulled out my first 2 gallons. We're going to see how much I can fit in this pot, and we're going to get them going. But if you're using fresh tomatoes, they said to put 2 cups of the tomatoes, you know, chopped up tomatoes, in your pot and bring it to a boil over medium-high heat and use a potato masher to mash them down. And while maintaining the gentle boil and stirring to prevent scorching, quarter additional tomatoes and add to the saucepan as you work. So you will go through this step over and over again. The remaining tomatoes do not need to be crushed as they will soften with heating and stirring. Continue until all the tomatoes are added and boil gently for 5 minutes. So I only need to keep this on the stove for 5 minutes of boiling time. So we're going to get started. And I'm going to set my book behind you. And I have put my pot in my sink so that we don't splatter everywhere. And these are the tomatoes from yesterday. They have the pectin added. That's supposedly a half gallon. And that is a gallon. And I don't think I'm going to get quite 2 gallons in here. That's all right. We'll set these back in the refrigerator. And we will start with what we've got in this pot. I'm going to turn this on medium because my jars have not come to a boil yet. Okay, I got a few more minutes on my sterilization going on. I want to talk about that for just a minute. The Ball Canning book doesn't recommend sterilizing your jars anymore, but what I have found, and they don't recommend sterilizing the lids anymore, but what I have found is when I open up a can of beans, I will have some black spots on my lids, and that is an indicative that they're not sterile and they're not, they're still edible, but they could contain salmonella or something else. So to sterilize your jars, you're going to place them in an empty canner, right side up, fill the canner and the jars with water to 1 inch above the jars, and you're going to bring it to a boil, and you're going to boil them for 10 minutes at altitudes of less than 1,000 feet. If you're over 1,000 feet, you're going to add 1 additional minute for each additional 1,000 feet above that level, sea level. my canning lids, I put them on the back burner and I cover them with water. And I turn them on and I bring them to a boil. And I let them boil for about 5 to 10 minutes. And I cover them because they will continue to sterilize because that water is boiling hot. So right here, I have put my canning lids. So in future videos, I may always sterilize at least the lids. Pressure canning, you really don't have to sterilize the jars, but I highly recommend it with water bath canning, that you do sterilize your jars. And I have been busy while I've been off camera. I have washed all my bowls that I had my tomatoes in. I've added an extra pot of tomatoes that you can't see because I want to make sure I have enough tomatoes to fill this canner. So I brought out my smaller soup pot and I have got it started. I have got all my canning supplies ready. I've got my lids in the hot water. I've got all my rings ready to go, and I use a soup ladle for that and just hang it up here. I've got a funnel. I got my jar holder because these jars are going to be hot when I'm trying to put the lids on it and the rings. And so this holds the jars while I tighten my ring. And my jar lifter. I have my debubbler, and the debubbler has a gauge on the end of it that will tell you how much space you have. With canning these in a hot bath, I can go to a 1/2 inch headspace, which would be to this point right here, to that point right there. And I have my lid lifter with the magnet on the end. Now, if you don't have the debubblers, but you have this, you can use this to debubble with. And I used a skewer yesterday to debubble with, which is perfect because it's disposable. You don't have to wash it again. But everything has been washed and cleaned prior to me starting this process. And my tomatoes are starting to boil, which is a good sign. And I've got just a few seconds on my canner. I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat up on these just to get them up. And I'm setting my timer for 5 minutes for the tomatoes. I'm going to go ahead and turn this burner off. That water will stay really hot. And when I get ready to put everything back in the canner, I'll already have turned the burner back on. So it won't lose much temperature. And I do keep a rag rolled up to catch any water that comes off my hot water bath, because my stove top and underneath my burners will be full of water if I don't do that. I've got me 2 towels here that I don't mind them getting mucky. I'm going to put another towel in the sink because I always bring my tomatoes over and put them in the sink to work. And I'm right-handed, so I work from the right to the left. And we are just about there, y'all. We're going to get started on canning these tomatoes. Okay, y'all, my tomatoes are boiling. I've got 2 minutes left on them. And then we will start canning these. Well, actually, I got a minute. So while that is going down, I'm going to go ahead and get this lid off my canner. You always open it where the steam goes away from you. And these are homemade. They have flannel on one side and an old washcloth on the other, and they work really good for muck. You can use them to protect surfaces and so forth. I got my duck bills on, y'all. Okay, timer's off, burner's off. We're going to start with a little pot because it's on the front. And I'm going to pan you down. I think you will be able to see what I'm doing there. We're going to start getting some jars out. Now I usually pour some water from the jars back in, and some water will go down my sink because you only need an inch above the jars. And they are hot. This is number 4. Oops, I almost lost it. Make sure you got a good grip on your jars. Now I'm probably going to end up having to dip water off. That's alright too. And I'm going to move my lid because I put it in the wrong spot, because I'm going to need a spot to set this empty container when I'm ready. And I'm going to grab my ladle and my salt. I'm going to double check my recipe on the salt. I think it's a half teaspoon. It's a teaspoon. Teaspoon per quart. Half teaspoon per pint. So I have a half teaspoon in here, so I'll be using 2 of these in each of my jars. When in doubt, add a little more. I've got 2 funnels so I can work quickly. And we are going to start filling these jars up. And if I get tomato juice out of this, you know, that's alright too. I can always drain the extra juice off my tomatoes and we'll drink it. And we're going up to half. set that in my sink until I'm ready because my sinks are clean. Get the rest of the juice out of this one. And we're going to set that over in the other sink. Now I got to get my big pot. And while this was cooking, I did keep stirring it because you don't want to scorch your tomatoes. Give it a good stir. We used pureed or crushed tomatoes a lot in a lot of different dishes. And the price of canned tomatoes has just gotten ridiculous, y'all. I think that's going to be good. Okay, we're going to debubble. And even though this is a liquid, you want to get all the bubbles to the top. And we're going to check the gauge on these just to be sure that we haven't gone over where we want to be. So it's this mark right here. There's one tooth, two tooth. It would be the third tooth. That's just under, just under, just under, just under. So I'm going to add just a little bit to each one of those jars. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. Sometimes when you debubble, you're going to lose a little bit of your volume because you've gotten air pockets. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to go around my rims. I'm going to get any gunk off that might be on the rims. And sometimes you get it on the ring area too, so you want to make sure you clean that. So I noticed I had a little bit on mine. I got one more to clean the top. And I'm through with that paper towel. Now we're going to go into our pot. I'm going to drop my lid over here. And this little handy dandy tool works really good to lift your jar lids. And I turn my jar lids opposite of each other as I put them in the water because I want to be able to get one lid and not get two. Sometimes you'll get two. So we have reached the point that we are going to band these. I'm going to get my tool. And you just want it finger tight. You don't want it any tighter than that. I'm going to go ahead and turn my pot back on. And you notice I'm doing it left-handed because my left hand is weaker than my right hand. So I know that I'm not going to over tighten my lids. And we're going to get those 3 jars in. I'll get the last one tightened up. One other thing, you always want to check your rims and the bottoms of your jars before you start canning with them, and I've got too much water in there. For any nicks or scratches or cloudiness on the bottom is indicative of it having a crack or something in it. See, I knew I was putting too much water back in this. So we're just going to pour that water out. Sorry about the noise, y'all. Took that out because I want to get a little more water out of there. Just to be on the safe side. Now, if you have hard water, you can pour what you have left over in vinegar into your water bath. I don't have hard water here, so I don't do it. It will rust your rack, so be aware of that. Just stir out. And you notice I'm holding these because I do not want that jar to break and I do not want to drop it. I'm not that strong. I got one more jar to pull out. And if I need to add hot water back, I can always add hot water back. Okay, funnels. Get this started. You want to work as fast as you can with your hot liquids. And it is quite alright to go ahead and can up all your liquids and put your canning jars in a pan that's got water in the bottom in the oven and keep them hot. Then I keep them, if I do that, I usually keep them at 200 to 250 Fahrenheit, because you don't want that liquid in your jars to get cooled off while you're waiting for your canner to finish off your next batch. So we're going to keep working these and cleaning up our mess as we go, because it's messy. This also makes a lovely tomato soup, y'all. You can add some cream to it and have cream of tomato soup. And you'll want to slap your mama, because it's so good. It's so much better than what you buy in the store. That's one of my fondest memories, was going to my Mama's house down in Mississippi. and I would ask for tomato soup and grilled cheese, and she would pull out a can of her homemade tomatoes that were crushed and heat them up on the stove and pour some of that fresh cream off from the cow and make me a grilled cheese sandwich, and man, I was in hog heaven. It's funny how you remember certain things from your childhood. Okay, we're going to get our debubbler. I think I got some with too much in it this time around. We'll see. Maybe not. That's right on the money. I was worried about it. This one needs a little more. That's good. A little more. And that's good. And I'm going to get a clean towel. And go through the process again of wiping the rims. That's why I go around the edge. Can y'all see that? Sometimes it will spill out. You see a little better. I just fold it over and get some fresh vinegar and a fresh cloth to work the last jar. Okay, we're done with that one. I'm going to pull out my last 3 lids that I have ready. I'll get that restocked and get it on again when I get ready to do the next batch of jars up. We're going to set my ladle over here. We're going to put this back on the burner and cover it. And I will just keep that on low to keep it hot. We're going to probably add more tomatoes to it. I need to put my bands on. We'll probably start working on the next batch of tomatoes here in a little bit once these are finished. And we will be done with the first batch and wait for them to come out of the canner. Now, if I had a second pot of water on, which I do have a second canner, I would already be sterilizing my next batch of jars. Last one in the canner, and I still got a little bit too much water in there. Well, we're just going to have to deal with it. It's probably going to spill over, but that's all right. Lid on. I'm going to flip my cloth over there, and we're going to get this up to boiling, and then once it comes to a boil, it's going to process for 45 minutes for quarts, 35 minutes for pints. And we will get some more tomatoes going here in a little while and get some more jars sterilized, and we will be back. You're going to see me change out these cloths quite a bit. I will be doing a load of laundry later, I guarantee you that. So we're going to get this cleaned up. I'm going to leave the cloth in the sink though, because it doesn't matter if it's wet or not. And we will be ready to process some more tomatoes in about 55 minutes or more. Okay, this has been cooking for 45 minutes. I just turned my burner off. And I'm going to just kind of set the lid off to the side to let some of that steam off. Those are going to sit in that for 5 minutes. That helps stop the siphoning off your jars. If you're curious about why you do that step, I did not tell you at the beginning of this that I went through my house and made sure every fan was off and that all my floor vents or my air conditioner vents were closed in my kitchen area, my dining area, and part of my living room area. The reason I do this is I do not want the air conditioner to come on and have a sudden change in temperature in here and bust my jars once they're processed. So, not everybody does that, but I do it. I live in a mobile home, and it can be a challenge sometimes to regulate the temperature. We have a really fantastic air conditioning unit, and it can get quite cold in here very quickly if I'm not paying attention. So I make sure I do that step. My mother always made sure there was no drafts. My grandmother also made sure there was no drafts in their kitchen when they were canning. Okay, yeah, my timer's fixing to go off for the 5 minutes of rest time, and I can pull these out. Now they may be separated in the jars right now, but as they cool, they come back together. You may have some separation even if you follow everything in the ball canning book. You can just, once the jars are cooled, you can just flip them a few times, and usually that redistributes everything. And we're almost there. Okay, this is still really hot, y'all. Can you see that? Some may have more separation than other jars, and that's okay. But it looks like I did a pretty good job on these. I need to move this jar over just a tad. You want to leave at least a 1/2 inch to 1 inch space between your jars as they're cooling. That one looked really good. And I can guarantee you the liquid in these jars are still boiling hot. And they all look really good. There's not much separation at all. So, there's my 7 quarts that I started. My water in my water bath has diminished quite a bit. I'm going to add some water to it as I'm adding the jars. And we're going to get the rest of this of my jars sterilized, the rest of these tomatoes canned. I still have 3 gallons to do, and I will come back at the end of that and show you how many jars we got out of this canning session. I'm pulling the last jars out, y'all. Y'all pardon the damage to my wall. We still got some work to do in this kitchen. And my husband just walked in the door. The puppies are excited.
There you go.
That is 21 quarts. Here's the other 14 that I did earlier. It's taken me approximately 6 hours to do all of this today, plus the 6 hours I did yesterday with getting everything prepped. And I am done for the day. We're fixing to eat supper. Y'all, it cost $1.38 a quart for home canned tomatoes. We paid $14 and $15 for the 2 boxes of Amish paste or Amish canning tomatoes. And I think that is a bargain. I don't care how you look at it. Now that's not including the jars, y'all. We reuse our jars from year to year, so we don't include that in our cost. Well, y'all, it's been a canning adventure today. I'm thankful that you watched and come along with me on this canning adventure. I hope you learned something along the way. We are going to enjoy 21 quarts of tomatoes this winter, and we are so thankful for the Amish community for selling us the tomatoes. May y'all be blessed.